Welcome to the Parenting with Impact podcast with your hosts Elaine Taylor-Klaus and Diane Dempster, co-creators of ImpactParents.com, an online community, award-winning blog, and service organization helping parents all over the world to raise complex kids become capable, independent adults.
Hi everyone, Elaine and Diane here, and we know that you want your complex kids to grow up to be happy and independent, and yet you're not always sure how or when to help with that.
In this podcast, we'll encourage you to collaborate with all kinds of complex kids and support them in navigating life and learning.
And we'll interview leading experts from around the world, as well as parents in our own community, talking about how training for parents actually helps these complex kids.
We'll talk about the issues we hear parents struggling with all the time and how a coach approach can support and empower your amazing young people.
We won't tell you what to do. We're going to help you figure out how. So let's move on to the next conversation. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another conversation in the Parenting with Impact podcast with Diane and Elaine.
And you just got Diane and Elaine today.
I did say Diane and Elaine. Sometimes it's Elaine and Diane. Sometimes it's the us show today. And we are going to talk about us, the parents, right?
Well, it's really funny because it's like we go through this process of figuring out what we want to talk about, and we can never remember what we've already talked about. So this is one of those topics that I don't think we kind of talk about all the time, I want to explicitly talk about it. So wait, we should just tell them what the topic is. The topic is, this is my language, Elaine, you're going to edit me, but why focus on me, meaning the parent? Why focus on the parent when the kid is the one that's struggling with behavior, with school, with life, with learning, whatever it is that your kid's struggling with?
Right.
Why focus on you as a parent?
Well, and which is connected to why is parent training recommended, or why do, why is self-care so important? There are a lot of corollaries to why focus on me, right? And part of the reason we're having this conversation is I was in an interview this week and somebody asked me my why, which was a really cool question. And we kind of talked about how I don't want kids to grow up the way that my kids grew up in the early years, the way I grew up or my husband grew up, feeling broken, right? And beyond that, a lot of my why is that because we parents of complex kids, nobody wants for our kids more than we do. Nobody wants them to be successful more than we do. And yet so often we end up feeling like we're broken or we're failing them or that we're not hitting what we need to be doing because there is, before we came around, there was no rule book for this. There was no guidelines for how you do this. And, I was talking to one of our parent groups this week, and I realized the way that the world that we're parenting in is completely unprecedented. You cannot apply anything from parenting the last century to the parenting that we're doing now in the world of technology and AI and yada, yada, yada.
And right? How many of us grew up, not just the technology and the AI, but how many of us grew up with a parenting style that is completely different than what society is suggesting is the go-to parenting style today? I mean, my parents were rule followers and they were we all did what we were supposed to do. And that was kind of the way we were raised. And if we didn't do what we were supposed to do, we would get in trouble. And it was just there was this sort of consequences mindset that we all grew up with that is not actually what works. What are you going to say?
Well, but I also think you got to tie that back to we live in a globalized world where we're not parenting our kids alone. In fact, we're very often not the prominent influence on our kids.
That's true.
We don't have our teachers' backs. They don't have our backs. My mom used to talk about how her mother was so tough. And if the teacher said something, that was it. And we're now living in a world where we are effectively co-parenting with the world. And so I think we end up doing that reactively in a lot of ways. We get scared, we get worried, we get afraid or frustrated or overwhelmed, and we don't really realize all of the ways in which that's actually impacting what's going on with our kids.
And so going back to the original question, it's why focus on the parents? Why focus on the parents is one of the things you're saying is because it's hard to parent. And if you have a complex kid, it's even harder to parent a complex kid. And so part of why we focus on supporting parents is because this is challenging. And our why is we want parents to struggle as little as possible. We know struggle is part of being human. At least I know I like that's the language I like to use. And we want to see the struggle to be as minimal as it possibly can for the parents.
Or productive.
Right, productive, right. And I think that as I'm saying that, I'm thinking, because one of the small groups I had this week, one of the things we were talking about was just how our tendency is as parents to let everybody else's needs go first. Right. And so we do forget. And so I like that we're starting with this, because it's like we do forget that we are humans and we do have needs. And it's like at some point you all have woken up and gone, do I even have a life anymore? What do I like to do? What feeds me? Like self-care? What the heck is that? Right. It's just sort of all of those things that go through our heads. So that's a very good reason to focus on parents. And it's not the only thing.
So many directions I could go with this. I was just in a coaching group for parents of young adults and having that conversation about, first of all, one mom was saying, I feel guilty if somebody walks in a room and I've been lying down.
Yeah.
Right. Like I can't even take a rest or can't even take a nap, And then another mom was talking about, we had this great conversation about how self-talk is self-care and how we speak to ourselves is so fundamental. And that, you and I are always saying self-care, it could be about massages and bubble baths, but it is so much more than that. Right. And Diane, I heard something this week that really shocked me, that we'd always talk about put your oxygen mask on first.
Yeah.
What I never really thought through before was how urgent it is. We've joked, and you used to tell a story about the first
I
time
told
you
it
were on a plane with
today.
your kid. And
Yeah.
so we all know this concept, right? But this woman I was in a class with today said, you got 8 seconds. You have 8 seconds to get your mask on so you can get your kid's mask on. And if you don't put yours on first, you're not going to get theirs on. And that urgency never really clicked in for me before. And part of what I think happens when we parent complex kids is that we do have this fear, this urgency, this need for everything to be okay, for them to be okay, for, fill in the blank, that when we come with that energy, they feel it.
Right? Oh yeah. Well, and I'm going to take it a step further, because in the small group I was in today, like we should do these after we have small group calls, but it was just this idea that I don't feel like I've done my job as a parent unless this is going on with my kid, unless my kid is successfully launched, unless my kid is getting A's, unless my kid is like whatever the fill in the blank is. It's almost like we're defining our value as a human based on our kid's outcome. And I got news for you, parents. It's like we can influence another human's outcome, and we ultimately and you can think you can control a younger kid, but there's going to be a point at which we're not going to be able to control anymore, right? We have no control over that outcome. And so to base our value on that outcome it's a setup. I'm going to call it that.
It is. It's such a setup, right? It's like, wow, talk about setting yourself up not for success.
Right. And at the same time, so let's go back. So recommended treatment, if you have a complex kid, is something that's called behavior training, parent training, behavior therapy. There's all kinds of words for it, but it's really training the parents so that the parents can support the kids. Go.
And I just add, but it's not just training the parent, right? So it's giving the parents skills.
Wait, hang on a second. Let's take a commercial break and then come back and explain parent training. How's that sound?
Excellent.
Hi, it's Elaine. And if you like this podcast, you'll love our coach approach. Whether you're a parent looking for support or a professional supporting families, we invite you to download a free guide with 12 key coaching tools at impactparents.com/gift. You can begin using a coach approach to help kids become more independent or improve all of your conversations at work and at home. That's impactparents.com/gift.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Okay, we're going to explain. So we're talking about why we focus on us when our kids are the ones with challenges, and the
first thing is because
challenges too.
and the first thing was because we always forget about ourselves, and we should make sure we're taking care of ourselves so that we can take care of our kids.
And if we don't put the oxygen mask on first, we can't take care of our kids. So, and
Right.
another thing that came up in the group today was how important it is to model for our kids
Yes.
that being a healthy adult is to take care of yourself.
Okay.
Right?
So the second part of why focus on the parents instead of the kids is because of the way recommended treatment works. So go with that.
Okay. So what's important about recommended treatment is that parents receive training. And there are a few components to it that are essential. One is that it happen in a group or a community so that parents can be in a community of peers and connect with what other peers are going through, realize they're not alone.
Right.
Another piece of it is that you want to give the parents skills, but not just skills. It's also really about helping shift mindset, helping parents shift perspectives on what the challenges are that the kids are facing so that they can come from a perspective that's more supportive and more helpful and likely to be more productive for the child. And then it's supposed to be in an environment with a professional where they can get feedback from the professional. Those are kind of the core components of what's recommended when parents get support, shift mindset, get skills, have a community of peers, and have a professional that they can kind of get some feedback from.
Research shows that
Research
outcomes
shows.
get better for kids
Right.
and for families, right? So those of you who are just listening to podcasts or just reading books and or on the internet at 4 a.m, we don't want to judge you for that because it's great stuff. And that's not parent training.
Yeah.
It really, it's not what we find. And I talk to parents all the time. It's this sort of, I get lots of great ideas from the internet. I listen to the podcast, I listen to the whatever else, and I get stuck in the information. And so parent training is about taking what you're learning and beginning to apply it to your unique family system, right? And that's the other reason to focus on the parents is because all the kids are different, all the challenges are different. And we're the ones that know our kids the best because we can see what it's like on a day-to-day basis at the, what do they call it? The point of performance, right?
Right. Where the challenges are happening. And as I'm hearing you, I'm like, and this is important, and it's the tactical stuff, right? But
Right.
we're always saying, okay, so what's underneath it, right? What's underneath? What's underneath? What's underneath it has to do with the tone of the home, the energy that we're bringing. What's underneath it has to do with our ability to be present to what our kids are struggling with without making their struggle our struggle that compounds their struggle, right? If we can be present to what they're struggling with without judgment, without shame, without fear or worry or embarrassment or all of that other stuff that just aggravates it, then we can actually help them navigate what they're dealing with and learn to get better where they're feeling healthy and whole and good about themselves. But if
Well,
we're worried they can't make it, they're going to feel worried that they can't make it. So we really have to do that work to shift our mindset so that we can create an environment that helps them see what's possible for them instead of to only see themselves as broken.
well, and I think I'm going to say it a little bit more practically. I'm not disagreeing with what you say, right? But sort of, absolutely. And okay, you've got a kid who's struggling, right? And it's
Yep.
this sort of, this kid is struggling and he needs help figuring out what's going on that's making this hard for me to do it. And if you've got a kid with executive function challenges, that it's, do I accommodate the challenge or do I teach the skill? And the kid can't do that on their own, right?
Right.
And so we focus on parents because number one, you have to figure out what really is going on from an executive function perspective with whatever the challenge du jour is. Number two, is it time to help this kid learn this skill if they've got a lagging skill? Is it time to help this kid to begin to self-regulate? Or is it time to accommodate because this kid's not yet ready and doesn't have the executive function to do the thing we want them to do, the school wants them to do, they want to do. And so there's a discernment there to go, what's the course of action? And
What's
then
needed from
there's
me right
what's
now.
needed right now. And then there's the action, which is, okay, someone needs to help this kid learn how to fill in the blank, follow through on instructions, self-regulate when they're really big, when they have really big emotions, something practical like turn in their homework. It's like, are they ready to learn that? Or do they need somebody to help them do that until they're ready to learn it? And that takes, go.
And what helps us as a parent be able to do that, to
Right.
be that calm, steady presence, to be able to discern when it's time to step in and when it's not, is doing our own work, right?
Right.
I love Seth Perler calls it, we've got to do our own deep inner work, right? But at the end of the day, we have to pay attention to the unintended impact that we're having and take that off the playing field so that we can be present to what our kids really need from us and not be bringing a bunch of stuff that we don't really mean to be bringing. We're just, if we're not paying attention, if we're not aware of how our stress or our overwhelm or our worry or our frustration is impacting our kid, and that doesn't, I don't want to make us wrong for having those feelings, that we are going to be stressed and worried and overwhelmed and frustrated and all of those things. And we've got to find our way to deal with it so that we can leave it outside the room and be present to our kid inside the room when they need us to be calm, steady, confident, and present.
Well, and so as I'm listening to us, it's like we're talking about two different things. Focus on parents, because parents do need help in their role as parents, period.
Period. Yeah.
Yeah. And focus on parents when you have complex kids, because kids need parents to support them in dealing with the struggles that they're dealing with. It's not something they can't do it alone.
In a way that is actually constructive and healthful and helpful, which could lead to a whole other conversation about, when people are asking for help and when we want kids to accept our help. We'll pin that.
We got a podcast on asking for help, I think.
On that.
Yeah.
But the key here is, I think our kids walk around with a lot of shame and guilt and, upset, and am I disappointing them? Am I failing them? And we walk around with a lot of fear and worry and shame and disappointment and upset. My kid's not hitting what I thought they were going to be. And that stuff creates a hot mess, as you like to call it, technical term here, that we can actually move through and do something with if we slow down just a little bit and pay attention to it.
Well, and I think that's part of the thing, Elaine, is we keep saying this. It's this sort of, our kid's the one that's struggling. And so we want all of our energy and our effort to be focused on our kid, right? And what we're calling to is like this sort of, there's this thing you need to do that's going to keep you healthy, balanced, educated, all the stuff you need to be able to do that. And don't forget, that's part of the equation. We weren't wired, most of us weren't wired just even to be parents naturally, especially in the world that we're in, let alone to parent the complex kids that we have in the complex world that we live in.
Right. Well, and what jumps out at me as you're saying it is that, I wrote something in the newsletter recently about, we call it parenting for a reason, because it's about the parent. And what I realized is that when you look at most of the classic traditional parenting programs, paradigms, frameworks out there, they're all about the kids. They're all about changing the kids' behavior. They're all about directing the kids' behavior. They're all about getting the kids' behavior to perform in a certain way. And while we want to help our kids,
that's the end point.
It's absolutely where we're going. And we get there. Like my group today, it was amazing how many people were like, wow, things are really going well. Things are really going well. I can't believe how much better things are. Like, we do get there, but we get there by not making the kids feel broken. We get there by helping the parents take away the extra stuff so that they can be present to what the kid's really dealing with without all that blame and shame and garbage and judgment, especially no judgment. Yeah.
All right. So a lot of stuff. Anything else we want to say before we close off?
Channel, what do you want to say? What do you want to finish with? What's the bottom line for you on this?
The bottom line for me on this is to really feel into what part of this you can play, right? Not in a blaming yourself, not in a looking at the mirror with a flashlight going, oh my gosh, I stink as a parent. And to say, okay, wait a second. I have the ability to control me, right? It's just this is the thing we started with, like, you can't control your kids. The good news is you have an enormous opportunity to help your kids, and you have complete control theoretically about what goes on in your brain and your body. Maybe not all the time, but we can influence ourselves in a much different way. And so it should feel empowering. It may feel a little scary because it's some responsibility there, but don't lose the importance of your role, and don't lose the importance of what you need as a parent to feel like you're successful as a parent. What do you want to end it with?
I love that. I think what's coming to me is that as a parent, this time we're spending with them now, whatever age your kids or young adults, is the shortest time, ideally, that we're going to be spending with them as parents. That we typically spend more time with our children as adults than we do as children. And if we can really think in terms of how am I setting them up for who they're being as a human being as they grow into adulthood, and we can be present to who they are, not what we want from them, not what the expectations are, not what the performances are, then we can really, really be there for them in a way that will support them in actually getting there. That's what comes up.
Awesome. All right.
All right, y'all. That was fun.
It was.
Nice talking to you, Di.
Always nice talking to you. So before we close, everybody take a minute and reflect. What do you want to take away from our conversation today?
What's your
One
insight?
nugget, one insight, one something. And
what
as
do you
we
do with that action, is there an action you want to take? Is there something you want to feel into, lean into? Is there something you want to commit to?
And as we always close, thank you for what you're doing for yourself and for your kids. At the end of the day, you make a difference.
Take care, everybody.
You've been listening to the Parenting with Impact podcast with Elaine and Diane. For more information on the Impact Parents community or to join Sanity School for Parents, please visit impactparents.com. If you like what you've heard, please share this podcast with friends who need similar guidance and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. For the essentials of Elaine and Diane's coach approach to parenting, download a free tip sheet at impactparents.com/podcast.
Behavior therapy training for parents is actually recommended as a first-line treatment for complex kids. For information about Sanity School, our training program for parents or teachers, which has helped thousands of families around the globe, visit impactparents.com/sanityschool.